The Empire granted you an overwhelming military force far superior to the primitive technology of the enemy. Yet under your leadership, the Imperial fleet was utterly defeated. General, you have been convicted of 323 charges.
We held overwhelming power. We possessed unmatched technology. We believed science would deliver victory. It was the inferior science of our enemies that led to our defeat. The Ministry of Military Affairs remains the most efficient department in the Empire's history. Our military remains the strongest in the universe, and the Empire will remain strong forever.
This war began 2.5 Earth years ago. The Empire granted you an overwhelming military force far superior to the primitive technology of the enemy. Yet under your leadership, the Imperial fleet was utterly defeated. General, you have been convicted of 323 charges, including dereliction of duty, treason, and incompetence. We now await your final explanation, and I, for one, am very curious. Given the overwhelming advantage we had, how did this war end up as it did?
Honorable Judge, as the former commander of the United Fleet and a 5-star general of the Empire, I first wish to clarify that this statement to the Supreme Military Court is entirely voluntary. It is not an attempt to garner sympathy or to defend myself. I speak today to correct the false reports that have distorted the true cause of our defeat. I have a duty to protest against the unfounded accusations and baseless slanders that have been levied against me. First and foremost, I must declare the Ministry of Military Affairs is the most efficient department in the history of the Empire, and our military possesses the highest level of execution in history. The only reason for our failure lies in our technological superiority, not the bravery of our soldiers or the decisions made by our commanders. Let me be clear. It was the inferior science of our enemies that led to our defeat. Please refrain from laughing just yet. Allow me to explain further. At the start of the war, our united fleet, in both numbers and equipment, was far superior to the enemy. Having emerged from the Second Cosmic War, we enjoyed both technological and economic advantages. We were confident that by the next Christmas, we would launch a decisive attack and crush the enemy. At first, the war proceeded according to plan, but by the 5th campaign, we fully realized how absurd our blind optimism had been. Victory was not as easy as we had imagined. To discuss the next phase of the strategy, General Walker convened a high-level military meeting, which I attended. It was at this meeting that the Military Research Center pointed out that our weapons had reached their technological limits. In fact, some of them were even slowing down the war effort. I do not mean to undermine the efforts of our aerospace and military experts, but we had to admit that for nearly a century, there had been little progress in the foundational theories of weaponry. The research center had only patched up old systems with few true innovations. These outdated weapons should have been retired long ago. Thus, we decided to shift our focus to new areas of technology. Soon after, our scientists developed a new superweapon, the Sphere of Annihilation, a device capable of destroying all matter within a several-kilometer radius. Yes, complete destruction. Enthralled by this ultimate form of violence, we became obsessed with it, yet we overlooked one fatal flaw. While the Sphere of Annihilation could indeed bring complete destruction in a limited area, it required long-range missile launches, and the expensive, precise detonators could only be used once. Previously, we had relied on older, cheaper ammunition, which, though only 1% as powerful as the Annihilation Sphere, was mass-producible and could be used for carpet bombing. With the Annihilation Sphere, however, if we maintained the same bombing density, entire enemy forces who would have been killed by conventional bombs would simply vanish. This seemed like an exciting prospect. Both the military and the scientists became enamored with the new weapon. The scientists in particular seemed to enjoy watching everything explode, and they demanded that the entire military be equipped with the annihilation sphere. Once again, I must emphasize, our Ministry of Military Affairs is the most efficient in the history of the Empire, and our military possesses the highest level of execution. Thus, we decided to revise our budget to retrofit all weapons with annihilation spheres. This was the first major mistake made by our scientific community. The retrofitting process proved far more complicated than expected, and we could not turn back. The large-scale modifications delayed strategic operations, and tensions began to rise between officers and scientists. While the annihilation spheres consumed the budget of the front lines, our fleet remained locked in a stalemate with the enemy. Even though some of the annihilation spheres had reached the front, we were unable to retaliate against the enemy's harassment in the near-star regions. Because the sphere of annihilation was so powerful, using it in the near-star regions would likely destroy entire planets. Furthermore, its high cost made it impractical to use recklessly, even for an empire as wealthy as ours. All of our plans had to rely on carpet bombing, which forced us to retreat from multiple star systems. More frightening than our technological disadvantages were our enemies. Though their warships were outdated and their weapons far less advanced, once combat began, our economic losses would vastly outweigh theirs. Now, all we had left were the annihilation spheres. In the chaos of space, even our best pilots couldn't control them precisely. While these weapons could obliterate the enemy with certainty, the enemy's cheap ships would dart through our tightly packed formations, sacrificing themselves to take down our more expensive vessels. In response, the Military Research Center unveiled a new weapon, AI. The suggestion from the Academy of Sciences was both tempting and convincing. They argued that in past wars, the decisive factor had always been human commanders, but humans are simply unable to adapt to the fast-changing battlefield. Mathematicians had analyzed historical battles, and their findings showed that even in victorious campaigns, our weapons had not been used to their full potential. Now, technology had the potential to change everything by replacing human commanders with AI. This idea wasn't new in theory, but it seemed far-fetched. However, after several complex simulated exercises, the AI defeated all human commanders. So we decided to equip our fleet with AI on a large scale. Unfortunately, problems soon followed. An AI contains billions of electronic components, so we had to design special ships just to accommodate them. To protect the AI, all our ships were turned into slow-moving fortresses. At first, the strategy worked well. The AI followed our expectations, precisely calculating the enemy's supply lines and pursuit limits. We successfully carried out a counterattack and dealt the enemy a heavy blow in the first engagement. However, it didn't take long for the enemy to notice our slow-moving defensive formations. The ships protecting the AI became glaringly obvious. In the second battle, the enemy adopted unconventional tactics, concentrating fire on the AI-equipped ships. Once again, we were forced to waste expensive ammunition on cheap enemy ships, and in maintaining our defensive formation, we lost the opportunity to pursue. General Walker also perished heroically in a ship collision. The enemy, though stubborn and unimaginative, was steadily expanding their gains, while we found ourselves increasingly at a disadvantage. In response, the Military Research Center presented one final weapon, the exponential field. This was an accidental discovery during their theoretical space research. The principle was complex, and only those with poor eyesight, like the old scholars, could truly understand it. To put it simply, if a warship equipped with an exponential field is surrounded by the enemy, activating the generator causes the ship to suddenly disappear. Incredible, unimaginable, yet highly advantageous to us. This new weapon had no obvious flaws, so we decided to equip all our ships. Once again, we acted with efficiency. However, with the failure of the previous two strategies, the enemy's assault became increasingly fierce. Time was running out. Fortunately, the modifications to the generators were not overly complex, and we quickly completed the first simulation exercise. After several more drills, we were comfortable with the new technology. I personally participated in the test flight, and the exponential field left a profound impression on me. But then, the enemy launched a decisive attack, forcing us to leave base and engage in battle. The exercises had to be cut short. The ships only had minor issues remaining, and under pressure from the front lines, we had no choice but to deploy them immediately. The enemy surely believed we had developed some sort of stealth technology. Our ships would vanish and then strike with devastating force. But victory was fleeting, because once again, the damned situation occurred. On the battlefield, after we repeatedly attacked the enemy's main force, they broke up their fleet into smaller groups, 3 ships per unit. When we began expending energy on these cheap ships, an unexpected problem occurred. With each use of the generator, our ships appeared in ordinary space, just a few miles from the enemy. When we discovered them, they had already spotted us. We were forced to retreat. After several attempts, the situation remained the same. Our enemies had discovered us first. I don't want to describe the scene when our fleet, shattered and disorganized, limped back. In reality, our casualties weren't severe, but our warships could no longer fight. Their rangefinders were severely malfunctioning, all because of the exponential field. Eventually, we understood the truth, but it was too late. The exponential field caused space distortions within a certain radius, leading to growing discrepancies in the actual distances within the center of the field. We had thought that switching off the field would restore normal space conditions, but that was not the case. Returning to the original state was impossible. Constantly switching the generator on and off was like stretching and compressing the ship's space-time, causing a lagging effect. The ship's internal objects could no longer return to their original states. Our inflexible enemies exploited this. They lacked our efficiency, but their tactics focused on forcing us to repeatedly activate the generator. Each time we did, the ship's electronics would suffer interference. After multiple distortions, the ranging precision failed completely. This error could not be detected on individual ships, but would only show up when compared with other equipment. The aftermath was beyond description. The level of chaos exceeded all imagination. None of the ship's parts were interchangeable. The dimensions of every component had changed, making repairs impossible. In truth, if we had time, we could have overcome these difficulties, but the enemy launched an all-out assault. Despite their weapons being a century behind, our fleet was brought to its knees by our own technology. This is the true story of our defeat. As I have said, to counteract the libels that have been circulating against the men who fought under me, and to show where the true blame for our misfortunes lay, it had nothing to do with the men who fought under me. Please believe me, our military is not at fault. The Ministry of Military Affairs remains the most efficient department in the Empire's history, and our military still has the greatest execution power. Our military remains the strongest in the universe, and the Empire will remain strong forever.